Hello, everyone. My name is Hector Villarreal. For my theme tracking project, I decided to go with spiritual warfare from Genesis to Revelation. I selected the theme of spiritual warfare and followed its development throughout the biblical narrative from Genesis to Revelation. This project helped me to discover that spiritual warfare is not simply a New Testament concept or a topic limited to a few passages of scripture. Rather, it's a foundational theme that runs throughout in the entire Bible, and it reveals the ongoing conflict between God's kingdom and the forces of evil. One of the most important lessons that I learned was how interconnected the books of the Bible truly are. Before beginning this assignment, I primarily associated spiritual warfare with passages such as Ephesians 6:10 through 18, and the armor of God. Through my research, however, I discovered that the theme begins in Genesis chapter 3 with Satan's deception of Eve and continues through the stories of Moses, Joshua, David, Elijah, the prophets, the ministry of Jesus, the early church, and ultimately the final defeat of Satan in the book of Revelation. This reinforced the idea that the Bible tells one unified story of God's redemptive work throughout history. One challenge I faced was determining which biblical examples to include, because spiritual warfare appears throughout Scripture in both in both direct and indirect ways. Another challenge was organizing the material in a manner that demonstrated the progress development of the theme while remaining concise and focused. To address these challenges, I created a chronological presentation that traced the theme from the fall in Eden to the triumph of Christ in Revelation. I used scripture, scholarly resources, images, and narration to demonstrate. Actually, it was a narration, and it wasn't narration, but it was on the speaker's notes to demonstrate how spiritual warfare unfolds across the biblical storyline. My theme tracking presentation emphasized that spiritual warfare is ultimately about God's sovereignty and victory over evil. Although Satan opposes God's purposes and seeks to deceive humanity, Scripture consistently demonstrates that God remains in control. Jesus Christ's death and resurrection represent the decisive victory in the spiritual conflict. And Revelation assures believers that evil will one day be permanently defeated. This project significantly impacted my understanding of the Bible. It helped me see how themes develop across multiple books and historical periods while contributing to God's larger plan of redemption. As I continue studying Scripture, I will be more attentive to how recurring themes connect individual passages to the broader biblical narrative. I also believe this theme has important implications for our modern culture. Many people view life's challenges solely through social, political, and personal perspectives. But the Bible reminds us that there is also a spiritual dimension of reality. Understanding spiritual warfare encourages the believers to pursue truth, remain steadfast in their faith, and rely on God's power rather than their own strength. As Paul reminds believers, for our struggles is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world. Ephesians 6:12, New International Version. Overall, this assignment strengthened both my academic understanding of Scripture and my personal faith. It demonstrated that from the book of Genesis to the book of Revelation, God is actively working to accomplish His purposes and to secure the victory for His people through Jesus Christ. Thank you very much. Again, my name is Hector Villarreal.